Larry Walker, a dear friend of mine, artist, Dean of Georgia State Art Department, told me a long time ago that composition is not dependent on the subject matter. The composition is the subject matter. And it really isn't about subject matter for me. I know it ends up being a boat with a chair and whatever else is in there, but it's always the composition that I'm organizing. And I don't try to think about the subject until the last stages of my work, because it's all about forms and shapes and how they relate to each other and how my marks relate to each other. I listen to a lot of jazz and I like a lot of music, and so I kind of paint like a jazz player. I improvise, I'm intuitive. 50% of my work I can't explain to you why I did it, it just did it. And I'm not ashamed of that, that's just how I work. And I do enjoy beauty. I love to paint things that will make people feel good and bring back memories. All of this work that you'll see today is about memories of things I've experienced. And the show is called Lost Parts Found. And it's not about parts that I found to build paintings out of, or about the sculpture. It's about the parts of my artistic soul I lost growing, and I'm starting to find them again. Like I said, I lived in Europe until I was 10, then we were moved into the central part of Texas, where I learned how to ride horses, herd bulls, brand, get kicked by bulls and horses, and that's part of my life. And then you'll see a couple paintings in there that reflects that. Drawing is the essence of my work. It's the foundation. I've talked about it before quite extensively. And I draw on top of my paint as much as I draw under my paint. So it's a continuous process. And drawing to me was in the beginning a handicap, because I still don't consider myself a painter. I still don't think I'm a great painter. I hate mixing colors. I mean, it's like I'll grab a little yellow and red and mix it on the canvas and hope it turns out. So I can't replicate anything, which I like. I enjoy that because I don't want to. And I like to show kind of a history of my work so the viewer gets involved in the process of another human creating something. So if you see lines that have been washed out or lines that don't make any sense, it was just my thought process. And there's another quote that I just love, and it's about my symbols. Symbols are living mirrors of the deepest understandings that have no words. And when you look around it, you'll see these symbols and they'll say, well, why did you put a typewriter on top of a column? And my story is because I think writing is an elevation of a structural entity through our whole universe that we've been following for centuries. And columns, they have a history, they have a beginning and an end, and they're beautifully done. And again, it connects me back to Europe, and then it connects me here. And so I play back and forth. So I want a boat because of my father's heritage and the connection and the psychological battle I had with my father. Because some of my boats will be partly decayed, some of my boats will be full, some of my boats will be restored. So I think, okay, I'm going to put a boat. Let me start with a boat. And I'm going, that's really boring. Let me see what else comes up. And so I start putting metals up here, and I start putting paints, and I draw, and then I change it, and I draw, and I change it, and constant. I mean, if you haven't noticed, I have horrible attention deficit disorder. And before Ritalin and before we were diagnosed way back, drawing kept me calm. So that's why I draw all the time. It's kind of like a Xanax for me, if you really want to get down to it. So I draw a lot. I've got a lot of nervous energy, and so many people have talked to me about these multiple ideas that I explore in one surface. And they kind of maybe say, well, that's really busy, but they say when I walk back, it doesn't look busy. It kind of all goes together. Well, the analogy is like the Impressionist artist. It's a bunch of paint and marks, and when you walk back, it kind of forms into something. And that's basically how I approach my work. It's about painting as a mark making. It's about making marks with my crayons, my pencils, my charcoal. Anything that I can put on this surface that stays, I will try with it. The biggest issue that I have is when I'm doing a show and I have all this work laid out, I look at it and I think it looks all the same, and I'm sick of Dennis Campay. I said, I don't want to be Dennis Campay. This is horrible. So, which transitioned into, at my age, I started late, so I've only been painting for 25 years, and I'm 62. I said, all right, what other thing can I do to get me out of my, what I was calling redundancy? I mean, so I go, okay, where do I need to go now? So I was tired of making cityscapes that individuals were saying, well, that looks like New Orleans, or that looks like New York. Because it wasn't. I create all my cityscapes for my architectural element, and I want to make places. So I purposely made these imaginary things that you'll see out there, imaginary structures and stairways, and there are so many different symbols in it and so many different thoughts, and that's where I'm going. So I went into sculpture, and you really have to read Sean Meghard's notes that he wrote about working with Dennis Campay, because he's so over there and I'm so over here. And I wasn't really constructing a boat. I was constructing a bunch of forms and shapes and materials that I found. And we worked in his workshop for probably a month, 2 on the boat alone, 4 to 8 hours a day with no air condition, and with all the dust, and like he said, the blood from the cut of the materials, the rusted metal that I dumpster dived across my studio, that my wife said, you're going to put me in a mental institution, because here's this old guy carrying these big old tubes of rusted metal and throwing it in the studio. It was probably one of the greatest experiences I've had in arts right now. It was just something that I picked something I was familiar with, a boat, obviously. I'm familiar with how it's constructed. So I picked that so I wouldn't go into something that would push me too far. So I picked elements that I was familiar with, and that's how the horse came. The horse has to do with me riding my barrel horse in Texas, and her name was Cricket, and that's how I did it. And then the boat, so we can expedite the discussion, is called La Barca, which is the boat in Italian, because my heritage from my mother's side is from Naples, Italy, and so hence the Madonna that's on the bow, but and the rudders. And so all these objects that you see on the sculpture were found. We were found in either his workshop, or I went to and got old pallet wood, and we pulled out all the old rusted nails, and we would hit the hard oak and they would bend, so I put a screw in it, and so we just kind of went along with it. The stories I try to tell hopefully will kind of blend and mix with maybe one of your stories, but it doesn't have to be my story, it could be your story.